Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. From new wheeling and curtailment rules to the establishment of an entity that aims to sell wheeled electricity to smaller firms, it's been an active period on the electricity front. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss these developments along with the latest bout of load shedding. Hi Terence.
Hi Chanel.
Let's start with load shedding. What does this latest episode mean for winter?
Well, I think it's difficult to extrapolate what happened this week for the whole of the winter season. It is embarrassing because, Eskom just announced its winter outlook and gave a sense of confidence that we could get through the winter period without any load shedding. But we are at a stage in the cycle where summer maintenance is still tapering down. So there's still a good chunk of summer maintenance underway. And if there's any delay in bringing back those units, which is what happened this week, and there's breakdowns at the same time, then you really do run a risk of load shedding. So we had this is what they call outage slippages, where planned maintenance was supposed to end on a certain day and it didn't, across about 4 power stations. And then there was a number of breakdowns that were unexpected, and that confluence led to them having to implement load shedding during the evening peaks for 3 days. So yes, embarrassing, not what they wanted to do, especially after giving us a sense that there was, Kusile units coming in, the Medupi Unit 4 that's been out for many years returning, the Kuberg unit coming back. There was a sense that maybe we would have a bit more fat in the system for this winter period and would get through it, which we did do last year. And we had that sort of 300 plus day of load shedding free. But they've had a very difficult summer period, and they've had to burn a lot of diesel. Actually, I think they've burnt a lot more diesel this year to keep the lights on during the summer maintenance than they did last year. But the argument is that they also did more planned maintenance. So it's a balancing act, but still the system remains vulnerable, and it shows that we still aren't building new capacity at the pace and scale that we need.
Meanwhile, NERSA has also made some important announcements on wheeling and curtailment rules.
Yes, so although wheeling's been with us now for, I think, about 15 years, and I think there's something like 100 wheeling arrangements in the system, the rules across the system, not just Eskom's sort of been on top of it and has had clear rules and framework for the way they enter into wheeling arrangements with generators. But for the whole system across the different voltage ranges and across municipalities, there hasn't been a standard set of rules. So I think it's important now as wheeling becomes more part of the system. This is where generators set up anywhere in the country and might sign contracts or supply agreements, power purchase agreements somewhere else. They need to use the grid. That exact electron doesn't necessarily get to your plant, but it gets into the network, and there's a contractual arrangement to allow for that clearing. So that is now having a standard set of rules is important, and that is now in place. It also enables Eskom to proceed with its virtual wheeling framework, which is really a contractual financial arrangement, allowing generators to supply to multiple off-takers using the grid and clearing again that financially through a system. And then the other thing that you mentioned was the curtailment rules, which I think is very important. When we had bid window 6, and that was really at the heart of load shedding, so we wanted to procure as much new renewable generation, wind and solar, as possible. We weren't able to allow any of those wind projects to proceed to the preferred bidder stage, and the argument at this time is that the grids in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape are entirely congested, and we can't cope with any more wind capacity coming in. Studies were done, and it was shown that if we just had 10% curtailment, which is where there's it's not designed for that level of overcapacity from the generation perspective, but we allow for it in the system, we could actually unlock over 3,000 megawatts of new capacity on the grid that could be allocated to wind projects. And now that framework, curtailment framework, using it as an ancillary service and then also having a compensation regime attached to that, has been finally approved by NERSA. So that should theoretically unlock immediate capacity for wind projects in the Eastern and Western Cape. So we're going to hopefully start seeing those projects that had been sterilised but that were really shovel ready, maybe crossing the line now, having this curtailment framework. The compensation is limited to what's in the MYPD6 revenue allocation, and that's not clear how much is really available for curtailment, and we'll have to see whether that's a risk factor. But at least the framework is in place for the next 3 years, and maybe there can be some sort of compensation regime in place using the regulatory clearing counter if necessary, although the NERSA did sort of suggest it's limited to what's in that allowable revenue envelope.
Discovery Green and Sasol have also announced the creation of an entity to wheel green electricity to SMEs.
So yes, you're seeing how innovation is starting to take hold now as you open up your grid. You know, traditionally you've seen these big bilateral PPAs. So a wind farm or a solar farm gets set up, they sign a 20 to 25 year power purchase agreement with a big entity on the other, big energy hungry entity on the other, in a smelter, a mine, for instance. And the motivation there, one is security of supply, two is to have visibility of your tariff, because you don't have great visibility if you just link to your municipality or to Eskom. And the third thing, and it's a major motivation for businesses exporting especially, is to decarbonize your electricity, so to get that green credit for your electricity. So it's really been about scale, and it's been about big company to big company type atmosphere. Here, the innovation here of this Ampli energy that was launched by Sasol and Discovery Green this week is really to say we're going to have this wheeled electricity that's going into the grid, and we're going to dedicate a portion of that, and in this case it's sort of 450 gigawatt hours a year, to businesses that can't enter into these long-term power purchase agreements, that don't have the wherewithal, but also don't want the risk and the hassle of entering such an arrangement, a long-term. So this is a month-on-month arrangement, and it will basically, the business that signs up, but they're calling it a membership, will be able to get access to green electricity. You know, it's in through the Msenge wind farm initially, and a few other projects that Sasol and Discovery Green are adding, 150 megawatts in total, that will be dedicated on the first tranche to these businesses. And they will then pay their bill as normal, as I understand it, but they'll get, at the end of the month, there'll be a reconciliation. These are your green credits, as well as this is your payback, because the electricity coming out, the wheeled electricity coming out of Msenge and other solar and wind farms is going to be cheaper than what they're paying on their municipal bills or their Eskom bills, so they'll get a cashback. So obviously it's quite an attractive or innovative offer. They've already signed up a number of initial customers, and they now have opened it beyond that initial customer base to others in the market. And it's now officially available. There's a website, there's an application process that you can go through. But it just shows, you know, obviously things are going to be changing as we go into a more competitive market into the future. But there are going to be these innovative schemes that de-risks the access to green electricity for smaller and smaller businesses.
Thank you. That's the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis. Also, don't forget to listen to the audio version of our Engineering News daily email newsletter.